It was a bitter winter night, wind howling, snow falling in heavy silence, when Jack spotted her. A teenage girl, trembling under a thin coat, standing alone at the edge of the gas station parking lot. Her arms wrapped protectively around her belly, her eyes empty and scared. Jack, a single father barely making ends meet, had no room in his life for more chaos, and yet, something in her brokenness mirrored his own. He didn't know her name. Didn't ask right away. All he could think about was how thin her hands looked, how raw her cheeks were from the wind, how young she seemed to be carrying such weight, both physical and invisible. He opened his truck door and said nothing, just tilted his head toward the passenger seat. She hesitated for a moment, suspicious, terrified even. But the cold had a way of stripping away pride, and eventually, wordlessly, she climbed in. Jack's home was modest. Faded wallpaper, creaky floorboards, a couch that had seen better years. His son, Max, was already asleep upstairs, oblivious to the sudden arrival of a stranger who would eventually shift everything. Jack didn't press her for explanations that night. He simply handed her a blanket, gestured toward the couch, and left a cup of tea steaming on the coffee table before retreating to his room. The next morning, sunlight filtered through dusty blinds as she stirred awake. He noticed how she flinched at sudden movements, how her eyes darted around as though expecting anger, fists, or shouting. Jack moved slowly, speaking gently, offering breakfast with cautious warmth. Still, she barely spoke above a whisper when she finally murmured her name, Lena. Over the weeks, the routine settled into something resembling quiet harmony. Lena stayed, at first unsure how long she'd be welcome. She folded laundry. She swept floors. Jack never demanded anything from her, but she did these things anyway, out of guilt, perhaps, or simply gratitude. His son took to her quickly, sensing something kind in her spirit. He'd sit beside her while she read aloud or painted tiny flowers on the edges of paper napkins to entertain him. Eventually, stories spilled out like cracked glass. Her parents had thrown her out when they found out about the pregnancy. Her boyfriend disappeared soon after. Shelters were full. Friends had turned their backs. There was nowhere else to go. She had been sleeping in a bus terminal for 3 nights before that fateful encounter. Her trust had been bruised, her hope barely flickering. Jack listened, never judged, never pitied. He knew something about broken roads and impossible choices. Raising Max alone after his wife passed hadn't been in his plan either. He'd battled bills, loneliness, exhaustion, the kind that clings to your bones. So he simply offered what he had. A roof, meals, and the kind of stillness where healing might begin. Seasons turned. Spring brought the scent of new beginnings. Lena's belly grew round and firm. Jack helped her register for prenatal appointments, drove her to checkups, and even learned how to install a crib from a YouTube video with spotty audio. They laughed about it, nervously, awkwardly, but it was the kind of laughter that reminded them they weren't alone anymore. Late one night, as thunder rolled across the hills, Lena went into labor. Jack didn't panic, though inside he was a mess of adrenaline and worry. He held her hand through every contraction, whispered steady encouragement, and wiped sweat from her brow while nurses moved around them like choreographed angels. When her daughter finally arrived, pink and wailing, something shifted in the room. Jack looked at Lena and saw not a girl lost in a storm, but a mother anchoring her child with fierce love. They named the baby Hope. Time passed. Jack never asked Lena to leave. She never brought it up either. She got a job at the local diner, the kind with chipped mugs and regulars who told the same stories twice. Jack picked up extra shifts at the hardware store, juggling schedules with Lena so one of them was always home. They became a team, not bound by blood, but by shared days, sleepless nights, scraped knees, and birthday candles. Hope grew up knowing 2 adults who adored her in different ways. Jack taught her how to ride a bike, kissed her forehead every night, and cheered the loudest at school plays. Lena pursued her GED, then enrolled in evening classes. Jack watched her juggle motherhood, studying, and work without ever losing that quiet determination that first broke through the ice around his heart. Years slipped by, and then, Jack fell ill. It started subtly, tiredness that lingered, coughing that wouldn't go away. The diagnosis hit like a freight train. He tried to downplay it, to keep their little world from unraveling. But Lena noticed. She always noticed. She rearranged everything, quit her job, paused her schooling, filled their house with meals he barely touched and reminders to take his medication. It was Hope, now 10, who climbed into bed beside Jack one evening and rested her head on his chest, just like she used to when she was little. We're your team, she whispered. Just like you were ours. Doctors didn't hold out much hope. But Lena refused to accept that. She researched treatments, sat through every appointment, asked endless questions. She fought, not just for Jack's health, but for the man who had rescued her once, long ago, without ever asking for anything in return. And somehow, through surgeries, setbacks, and sheer force of will, Jack got better. Slowly, painfully, but better. One sunny morning, as birds filled the air with music, Jack stood in the kitchen sipping weak coffee, watching Lena help Hope braid her hair for school. Their laughter filled the house. And in that simple moment, he realized something profound. What he had given Lena that night, shelter, safety, a sliver of kindness, had returned to him 1,000-fold. She had become his miracle. Not just by staying, but by rebuilding him when life tried to break him. By loving his son like her own. By becoming family in the truest sense. And though the world would never know their story, within the walls of that little house, it had been written with quiet, unshakable love.